when I was sharing some of my stories, they were a lot of them were quite large stories. Because, for example, if I said something like, I was a workaholic, that is a theme. A story within that might have been the day that my friend Jane rang up and said, I haven't heard from you for a while, are you okay? And I said, well, actually, no, I'm not, and promptly burst into tears. And she said, is there anything I can do? And I said, well, actually, I would absolutely love to have somebody who could just come and sit in my office with me and help me go through my accounts that are due. And so she did. Now that's a story. That is a little story with dialogue and characters and action. That's the story. The being a workaholic and having a burnout are two themes. So that's just something for you to think about before we go any further with the presentation. So stories are much smaller, much more focused than maybe you had in your list. So just bear that in mind as we go forward with the seminar. So we're going to talk about daring to share, because that's where we're going to be ending up at the end of this workshop. So write it down for yourself. That is already helpful. That is already better than you having something like my memory of when Jane came round and helped me with my accounts, going round and round my head in the middle of the night. It's much better to write it down and get it out. I always remember meeting a psychiatrist at a conference once, and he said, if it doesn't come out, as in out of your mouth, it goes down, as in into your gut, where it can fester. I've never ever forgotten that. So write it down. Write it down for others to read, and the healing it will give will be exacerbated. And at the same time, by writing it down for others to read, you're actually creating a legacy that you really will value. Believe me, I have spent the last year writing 52 lessons for the Life Story Jar program, so that there's one lesson a week. And I have been thrilled to bits with the fact that I can now say I've written 52 of these little tiny stories for my own family. And yes, the story of Jane coming round that day is one of them. You can say your story aloud in a safe space, so in a group of people who are not going to judge you, and that will also help. That is also sharing. So if you were to write your story down and then read it to somebody else, that will make the value of that story even greater. I've often said to my students, keep it sacred, not secret. So that's why the safe space is important. But keeping it secret, keeping a lid on it, keeping it zipped, it's not always the right thing. There's a time and a place, of course, and some stories are better not shared with too many people. That's why you need the safe space for some of them. It's important to be authentic. It's important to always write your own truth. You know, they say that memoir is non-fiction. Well, it is non-fiction in a way, but there's also a school of thought, which I do actually believe and agree with, that all memoir is fiction. So I've just contradicted myself there. All memoir is fiction because it is your view of what happened. And you might have another sibling who was there on the same day experiencing exactly the same thing, and their interpretation will be completely different. So that's why they say that all memoir is fiction, because to somebody else it might seem like fiction. It's your truth. So it should be your truth. And remember, it's okay if it's only your truth. It's okay if it's subjectively your truth. But that is your story. If you write a story and it can resonate with somebody else, so I just gave you the example of my burnout and Jane coming and helping with me with my accounts. I expect there have been times in your lives where maybe you've had a meltdown of some sort and you've needed to ask somebody else to help. So hopefully my little tiny burnout story might have resonated with you in such a way as has made you realize, yeah, I should really write about the day that I wanted to put my baby in the washing machine and the next door neighbor came round and rescued it. Yes, I know it's scary. It's scary writing it down for yourself. Believe me, I've had my own experiences, and if you read Monday morning emails, you'll know what they are. That took a hell of a lot of courage for me to write down too. But you know, when you write things down, and I don't necessarily mean for publication, even for yourself, when you write things down, it lessens the impact of them. But if somebody else reads that story, what happens is that they don't judge you for what they read. They actually only see themselves. And you might think I'm making that up, but I'm not. It's been proven. It's absolutely true. You will not be judged for your own failings or for some of the horrible things that may have happened to you. You will actually just make somebody else see themselves. And I don't believe it's narcissistic. I really don't. I believe that if you write something down because you want to heal, or because you want to inspire or support others, or you want to make other people laugh, then it's not narcissistic. Now, the life story jar, I've come up with the concept of the jar that you can put the different sorts of stories in your life into these jars. So here's an illustration of the jars. I have been told they look a bit like urns for after somebody's been cremated. And that was not my intention, but in a way, that's kind of appropriate too. So I'll let that one ride. And if people do the Life Story Jar program with me, we do offer at the end a service where you can put your stories into a book. So this is mine. Now for the lesson. We're going to write about a person from your past. But where to start? Let me give you a few clues and tips. Here are two tools to help you. Now, those of you who've been on my course at the Watermill will have discovered that most of it is about this, what I call the SPICE tool. And SPICE is an acronym for the 5 elements that you need to employ in order to make your stories really leap off the page and be compelling and fun to read. And the reason they are called the SPICE tool is because that's an acronym for specifics, place, incident, character, and emotion. And I just wanted to come up with something that was easy to remember. I could have called them the 5 tools for writing life story, but I really wanted something memorable. And I like spice because you add a bit of spice to your cooking to make it taste better. So it actually took me 2 years from coming up with what the 5 elements were to coming up with the acronym. So to take a long time. So we've got specifics, place, incident, character, and emotion. You need to have all 5 in a piece of writing in order for it to really be an interesting read. So specifics are the details. They are, I'm going to give you a few examples in a minute of what they might be. So the specifics are the little details, like don't just say it was beautiful, don't say it was a lovely day, it was an amazing view, the food was delicious, because I call all those adjectives empty adjectives. They actually mean nothing. If you might say a meal was delicious, but somebody else might think it was disgusting. But we don't know. Why was it delicious? Was it because it was full of lemongrass and kaffir lime leaves, and the chili was made the tip of your tongue tingle? That's the specifics, because now I can begin to taste it in my own imagination. Place, everything happens somewhere, everything needs a context. So if you remember, everything happens somewhere, every single scene, every story. When Jane came round that day to help me with my accounts, it happened in my office where I'm sitting now, so I don't need to describe it because you can see it. But is all relevant. The incident, an incident is something must happen. And when I say something has to happen, it doesn't have to be anything huge. Just this has to be some sort of movement, interaction, something small. It can be as small as somebody asking somebody if they'd pass them the sugar. It's just something happens that makes people move and interact. Stories all have somebody in them. You might think that they don't, but they do, because you're going to be in them and you're a character, and you have a personality, and you move in a certain way, you dress in a certain way, you speak in a certain way, and those things are all part of your character. If you ever read a novel, all the characters, the people in it have very strongly drawn personalities too, and if you read a novel and just think about that, well, what are they doing to paint that picture? You'll notice that they don't tell you absolutely everything about a character. They just tell you enough for you to be able to imagine that person for yourself. And the fifth element is emotion. That's usually the bit that most people are scared of. We want to know how you feel or felt, and we want to know how the other people are feeling as well. So for yourself, you can explain how you feel and you can show it. But for the other people, you don't want to say your, excuse me, your daughter was grumpy. You want to show her being grumpy, because it's your point of view. You're writing it from your point of view, so you have to be able to express how somebody else is feeling by showing what they're doing, by demonstrating it. So spice is one tool that can be incredibly helpful for writing a more compelling story. And then the other thing is it's very simple and it's very well known. It's these 6 serving men: how, when, what, where, why, and who. If you think, well, how did it happen? When did it happen? What actually happened? Where did it happen? Why did it happen? And who did it happen to? Just think of those, make sure you've responded to those, and you will have a very full piece. So these 2 tools, spice and the 6 serving men, will serve you very well. But let's focus on the most important parts of those today. So the first thing, which is more important than anything really, is that, and I've already mentioned it a little bit, is you need to show, not tell. So that means you need to let the reader picture the scene. Just like when you're reading a novel, you can imagine things are happening, you can really picture it. You need to let the reader feel the same emotions that the characters are feeling. So instead of telling the reader that your grandmother was a miserable old trout, share a scene, in other words, show us, where she was yelling at your grandfather so loud she made the windows rattle. Show how grandpa seemed to get smaller and smaller the more she raged. That's showing. Let the reader meet the characters. I think if you bear that word in mind, you need the reader to meet them. That will help you to remember to paint them. Let the reader be a fly on the wall. You might know your house is a Victorian red brick house at the end of a terrace, but if you don't write it down and describe it in some way, the reader won't have a clue whether you live in a bungalow or an apartment, or they really won't be able to picture the scene at all. So remember the context and the setting. Let the reader see these things. You take things for granted. The reader won't. I like the phrase paint a picture with your pen, so remember to do that. And if you just focus on people and places, even though spice is specifics, place, incident, character, and emotion, if you just focus on people and places, it will make a world of difference. So the characters and the places that they happen. So if you sprinkle some specifics, which is another element of spice, here are some little tricks to help you paint your place more effectively. You could mention the name of the town or the city it happened in. That really helps. Give the name of the street. People may never have heard of the town and never have heard of the street, but the moment you put them there, they give them something to hang on to. They're like signposts. Name the plants and trees. So don't say it was a beautiful woodland. We don't know what was in the wood. Tell us what the names of some of the trees are. And yeah, you might have to Google to find out. Show the architecture. That really helps us to see it. Perhaps show the furniture in the room. Not every single piece, but if you know that that person has got a great big plastic orange sofa, that absolutely leaps into your mind's eye. And if you know they've got a Louis XIV chair, that leaps into the mind's eye. You can't unthink it. And the view out of the window is a pretty useful thing too for place. It can really help with the setting, but it can also help with the mood. The view can be quite a symbol as well. So if it's raining outside, then maybe you can have a sad scene. So there's something the view can be quite a useful thing. Think how many stories you might have read about somebody in a hospital bed. They so often talk about what the view is out the window. And if it's just a car park, it lends an atmosphere of sadness to the piece. So remember the view. And character. Here are some specifics you can sprinkle for character. Their name. It doesn't matter what the name is. It doesn't matter if you've made it up, but people need a name to hang on to, because if you keep talking about her daughter, it makes her a sort of nebulous nothing. But call her Henrietta and immediately you'll have a picture of her. Facial features can be useful, not all of them, but some of them. The body shape's useful. Body language, the way they move, the clothes they wear, quirks and twitches, how they interact with others. Maybe they're always interrupting. Maybe they sit there with their hands folded on their lap. How they speak. Maybe they've got a Yorkshire accent. What they say. What they say. That leads me on to my favorite trick for writing stories, the tag. Enliven your stories with dialogue tags. The tag is what they call the bit that goes after the piece of speech. Dialogue tags add character and movement. So here's a little piece of text I made up, a little piece of story. While we're on the screen and you're looking at it, do notice that the way it's laid out, notice how the dialogue starts the lines, notice how the dialogue's in inverted commas, and notice how every time a new person is speaking, they have a new line. I have put the tags in yellow to make them really stand out. They go after the dialogue and they tell you a bit more. So are you smoking down there is the dialogue, but the tag is she'd bellow down from her upstairs eyrie where she lay propped up by pink filly pillows beneath a greasy second-hand patchwork quilt. A right lady muck with a voice too large for such a small woman. It's a long tag. The tag is much longer than the dialogue, but it is the tag that paints the picture. No, Mum, is the dialogue. Jane would reply, then blow a string of, oh, it's an accident, and then blow a string of smoke rings up towards the ceiling. So that the tag is much longer than the dialogue, and people often get hung up because they can't remember what people said. It doesn't normally matter so much what they said because it's the tag that's interesting. So this example will remind you of the dialogue tags and how they can be used to do place, to do character, to do incident, to do emotion. They are incredibly useful. So now it's your turn. I'm going to give you a prompt. Now, if you do the Life Story Jar course with me, that's how it works. You get a lesson and you get a prompt. And the prompt you're going to have is a person of influence. I want you to write a story of an interaction that happened between you and a significant older person. So it could be a parent, a grandmother, a mentor, a godmother, a next door neighbor, a teacher, somebody with a strong personality who's influenced you in some way. I want you to tell us a story with an incident, with some little story that happened. I want us to meet them. I want you to show the scene unfold. I want to be able to picture it. I want you to have added some spice and remember the 6 serving men. So, whoops, you're going to have 10 minutes. You'll be muted. 10 minutes to write it. You will be surprised how much you will write in 10 minutes. And then we're going to share. It is optional. You don't have to share. If you share, I'll give you feedback. And I will be commenting on what's good and which bits of spice you perhaps could do with adding, or which bits of spice you've added extremely well. So that's what we're going to do.